I'm now going to welcome the session, and that is the current panel discussion on forging sustainable partnerships between business advisory service providers, which is mostly denoted as BASPs, and financial institutions, that is the FIs. To take us through this panel discussion, allow me to introduce our moderator for the session, Ms. Regina Gasheri. Over the years, she has worked on various projects in studio production and live outside productions. This has honed her skills as a television program's producer and director. As a business news reporter and anchor, she endeavors to keep demystifying business technical jargon and give business news reporting a human interest angle, making it simple and easy to understand. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and Psychology, and she is the current senior business reporter and television host at Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. That said, let's give a round of applause to Regina. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be here. I know it's after lunch. You're tempted to catch a snooze or two. So we'll try and make it very interactive. Besides, we're talking about sustainability. And when I hear sustainability, I'm looking at it from a business angle. There's no investor who is going to put their money where they're not going to get their returns. So, talking about sustainability and, forging these partnerships, BASPs and FIs, targeting MSMEs and SMEs at a time where, especially here locally, we're talking about building back better. So I'd want to introduce my panel that is going to help us understand how we're going to forge sustainable partnerships between FIs and BASPs. Is none other. Calling to the podium, let's start with the gentleman this afternoon. We have Oscar Anyona, who is a founder of Swaso Consultancy. Kindly give him a round of applause as he takes to the podium. Next on my panel is a lady, none other than Catherine Gitonga, who is a Chief Executive Officer at Smart Regional Consultants. Kindly give her a round of applause as she takes to the podium. Further on in this panel, I'd want to introduce yet another lady. Yes, we talk about, gender equity, affirmative action and such. Well, we're about to see this witnessed in this particular panel. I'd want to introduce Hannah Gakuya, who is a Relationships Manager, Partnerships and Ecosystems Banking at Equity. That's where the money is at. And last but not least, to make this panel complete, I'd want to bring forth a gentleman. This is none other than Bonano Badia, the Chief Credit Officer, Agricultural Finance Corporation. Asante sana as you walk. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause as he takes to the podium, please. Now, more than often, we have a disconnect between information and financial institutions. At the end of this particular session, we'd want to have the requisite information that is going to ensure that MSMEs, who we're calling business, because now they're business, giving us business too, because at the end of the day, you're not going to invest where there's no return. To start us off is you, Mr. Oscar Onyana. What has been your experience, as a BASP working within the Lakeside region? And what have been your key lessons in these 4 years that this particular program has been underway?
Thanks a lot. It has been a good day. And going by the experience that we've been having when we work with the financial institutions, initially it used to be a bit challenging, but going forward, at least we have managed to get into the products that they give out, products that they sell to the market. Because the disconnect that existed before was the products are there, but the public, the targeted customers, are not aware of the products that are there. So by us coming in, we acted as somehow an extension of giving whatever they have in the institution to the public, so that it is now becoming easy for even the public to know, the SMEs to know whatever is available in the financial institution as per the intake of what they want. So initially the information was not so well, but by BSPs getting involved in the KIM project, we are getting now a change and a shift in how the products are being accepted in the business world. So the collaboration that we are having with the financial institution is making it now even possible and even at least acceptable, because initially we would find that the business community, the SMEs, they will go with a fixed mind that I need this amount. Now this amount, if he's not able to get that amount, he will say that I have not been able to be assisted. But with us, before even reach at the amount that they want, what we do, we first do what is called the need analysis. The need analysis will give us an insight of what the SME needs. Sometimes they will find that they are looking for money, but what they need is not money. What they need is just a capacity building to make them use the already available assets that they have to change whatever they want. So before we take them to the financial institution, we have to know, what do they need? Do they really need money, or do they only need a management advice so that they can work on what they need for? But after we have realized that the amount they need, we have to advise based on the benefit that they're going to get on that money. So,
very well said. So you've already addressed the issue of lack of information. Now that we have the project, or rather the product, they may not necessarily need the finance. Let's bring in the financial institutions. Madam Hannah Kakuya, there's a mic to your end. Now this question is about, how then do these MSMEs package themselves, or what are you looking for from these MSMEs so that they can actually access that elusive financing?
As I was called, I'm Hannah, and from Equity Bank, and I'm in the Department of Food and Agriculture, so I think most of my questions I'll be basing them on that, and being in Equity for the last almost 10 years, have been very interesting working with farmers, and especially small-scale farmers, because that is where we thrive. And I will say now we are no longer there, but we are going to across the whole value chain, and we've realized we are not getting it right because of looking at individuals and not exactly looking at the whole ecosystem. So we have reverted to banking an ecosystem, and by that I say we start with an anchor and look at what is coming in and what is going out from the anchor. And I would say that when I'm looking into an MSME, I'm not exactly looking at the turnovers. I want to exactly understand if they understand their business. That is brought by experience. Have they worked in this sector space for some time to understand their business? How do they understand this business, and as where they are coming from, where they are, and are they looking into the future in this business? Because we do not want to invest in a business that does not have a future. So I would say, other than the other things we look for, turnovers, are they credit worthy and all that, I want to know, are they understanding? And by that I want to say that we have come from the transactional based lending to the relationship based lending. Yeah.
Relationship based lending, and that's where BASFs come in. So Madam Catherine Gitonga, drawing from your background, with the heightened growth of prospects in MSMEs and SMEs, how do we package them effectively to get that financial aid that they require?
I have to say, for us, our expertise is in Northern Kenya packaging SMEs, as well as the rest of Kenya. And I'll speak to the thin markets there. And by packaging SMEs, one thing we look at is what financial institutions are looking to support SMEs in certain value chains like agriculture and small crops or small animals, as well as climate smart agriculture. So we look in the market for the kind of financial institutions that support that kind of lending. And I have to say one of them is, Agricultural Finance Corporation. Equity Bank is also in that kind of line. Then we package the SME to fit the needs of the financial institutions as well as the needs of the SME itself. So like Oscar was saying, if the SME is looking for too much money that they can handle, as a BASP, we advise them to reduce that and get the money in a tiered manner. But as well, work with the SME to also strengthen them to get the next batch of money to do that. So it's important to package the SME to fit that market. Something else I can say is SMEs are also, financial institutions are also considered as SMEs, the larger SMEs, and we've also worked with AFC to package the financial institution to access finance for on-lending to SMEs. And successfully, we've had a $5 million transaction doing that. But we also considered, AFC as a transaction that we needed to package again to fit the market. So we looked for the impact fund that fitted the bill for AFC and did the packaging to do that linkage. So both sides worked. Yeah.
5 billion. That's quite a huge amount. I can see you nodding from the far end, Bonano Badia there, the Chief Credit Officer, Agricultural Finance Corporation. What has been your lessons, especially now lending, focusing on ourselves and on matters of agriculture?
AFC is a slightly unique institution, and unique in the sense that it is a development bank and slightly different from how commercial banks run their business. We pick the slightly risky segments of the market and prepare them to participate into commercial banking. And in this space, what we have realized mostly is information asymmetry. There is what we as financial institutions require, and there is what is perceived to be the requirement of the financial institutions by these clients. There is therefore a missing middle, and this missing middle, this is where the BSPs come in. And the role of this BSPs is to prepare these clients and to prepare them to a level where then you can participate. And I would give examples where we have participated with SRC, for instance. We had always had a perception that the Northern Kenya is extremely risky, and most financial institutions actually have that perception that the Northern Kenya is very risky. Having a partner then that understands that segment very well, we were able to prepare these SMEs, and not only prepare them, but prepare from the point of enterprises that they were participating to, and creating a feedback loop so that producers would have a market and that market would have an eventual market, and connecting these segments within the mainstream markets of the country, for instance in beef. And what we have seen in segments where we would traditionally not look at, these segments have actually proven to be profitable and to be paying their facilities, maybe even better than the traditional ones that we had been looking at. So it is just about information asymmetry and this missing middle, and how then we connect this missing middle.
Now, when it comes to the issue of liquidity, FIs, we're looking to FIs to solve the question of liquidity. They're very good at actually loaning, but are they as good as that in terms of mobilizing those funds? Let's start off with you, Bonana.
I will talk from the perspective of AFC and how we were before we participated with some of these PSPs. We had our trials in the international markets, sourcing for these funds to take to the very risky segments where no one would look at. Truthfully, we were not prepared, and it had to take the hand of a BSP to take us through issues of compliance, to take us through issues of taxation, to take us through issues of governance. And out of that particular experience, certain doors started opening. And it is on realization of that we actually accessed funding, and the experience that we had with the BSP preparing our pipeline, and on the other end also preparing the sourcing of funds. We were able to connect a farmer in Marsabit to funding in the United States, which ordinarily that loop would not have been completed. So we believe that that is a role that is there, and that is a role that we should look at this BSPs from the perspective of preparing your pipelines, but also from the perspective of connecting financial institutions to capital that is specific to certain thin areas of the economy that need participation and need to be brought up.
Well, I see Oscar here nodding in regard to that, specificities, the connection that BASP provides, not only between FIs and also their clients, but also giving it a bigger scope. We're not talking just about local, we are also going global. What's your take on that?
True that with the SPs and the SMEs and financial institutions, if we work together, it is possible that most of the SMEs who are not having the knowledge of the product that they have will be able to access them through the BSPs, because the working relationship that we have developed, first we go as much as understanding what are the products that these financial institutions are having before we even go to our customers. So when we speak with our customers, I'll listen to the customer approach. Then from the discussion, I'll know which financial institution is having a better product for the specific customer. Several financial institutions have different products, and they can't apply across the board. So from the discussion we are having with our customers, SMEs, we know that if I take this pitch to specific financial institution, he will be able to assist it, not only in the access of the product, but also on the follow-up and some other capacity building that is going to be done through us. So that information is very relevant, and it helps us much in knowing where to go to when we have a specific need to tackle.
Madam Gakuya, what role can BASPs play to actually stem the rate of default when it comes to loans?
When it comes to loans, I would say that BASP, because I've understood what they are doing, though our customers might not have the information, is walking the customers through the journey of understanding the purpose of to which they are picking the money, to understand their financial analysis in their businesses. And once they have all this understanding and the BASP is able to coach them through, then they meet their purpose. Once they take the loan, they are very prepared when they are coming to the bank to have a facility. And once they meet the purpose, we find that 80% would be able to pay back, and so the default comes down big time. Yeah.
So if BASPs do their work, then the rate of default actually goes down. But then the issue of information. These people who are walking through your door, Madam Gakuya, do not know that there are other services that are out there to support them when it comes to affirmative action funds as well as credit guarantees and such. So how do you draw the line? How do you know who to tell what? And would that at some point, affect your business?
When it comes to the issue of guarantee, and especially for equity, I think it has been out there. Everybody is saying Dr. James Mwangi signing guarantees right, left, and center. And I would say the people around towns would have that information, but the people out there in the rural areas might not have the information. So we're going out. We have this partnership with MasterCard Foundation. We are building capacity for our customers and for non-customers. So we have gone out to train our customers totally free. They are not paying anything. So we have started this program of capacity building, and we are able to tell them that right now you can pick a loan, even if you don't have that much collateral like we would have asked for. Right now, maybe we need 100%, you could pick a loan of 60%. Then we understand that the guarantee is there, but it's risky to really let these customers know that there's a guarantee, because if the guarantee covers 40% of the facility I'm picking, then depending on the knowledge of the customer, they might decide to pay 60% and leave the 40% be paid by the guarantor. So
that is quite risky. I'm sure the ones in the room are not planning to default on the loans that they already have on account of that piece of information.
So we choose to sell the benefits of the guarantee and not exactly talking about the guarantee. Yeah.
Very smart, very smart, very smart. wants to get into a debt situation. Now, Madam Catherine, let's talk about emerging issues when it comes to, we have seen the globe is taking a beating. Now we're talking about uncertainties around the Russia-Ukraine war. We're also worried about upcoming elections that are just but 19 days away. When we talk about the current environment that we find ourselves in as far as business, the environment is concerned, and building back better, from where you sit, from a macro as well as a micro point of view. These linkages between BASPs and FIs, the trickle-down effect in MSMEs, are we feeling it?
I have to say yes on my part, because as a BASP, you can consider us as a repository of information. We know the financial institutions in the market, the venture funds, the PE funds in the market, and what they're offering. And we also know the SMEs in our pipeline, and we also know other BASPs that, that we work with. So when an issue like you get an SME that looks for climate financing, then we know who to link them to. And now, for example, what you're saying, we have drought coming up. So there are those who are already looking at that and linking to SMEs and looking for those SMEs. And sometimes you also get financial institutions that write to us asking if we have SMEs led by women or youth or persons with disability that are in agriculture and need this kind of financing. And a lot of this comes a lot from venture capital firms, impact funds that are looking for, impact in those areas. So yes, as a BASP, we tend to be aware of current issues. And additional information I have to say is at the program, Kenya Investment Mechanisms, we have sessions as BASP where we're introduced to, a different array of financial institutions, impact investors. So we keep increasing our repository of information as a BASP.
Now that we have the DRC as part of the larger East African community, we are looking at that market, 90 million a market, and it seems very attractive in verbatim. But from where we sit right now, we're looking at our investments and the information that we're getting. And I want to focus on also Oscar's area of expertise working in the lakeside. The requisite information around investing, especially in the DRC right now. Are BASPs also looking at venturing in that and offering that service?
Yes, it's true. The information is now out regarding the investment that can be done in DRC. And as BASP, especially the ones that we operate on the other side, the information is still not yet very thorough on the ground, because they see them as summaries in the TVs. But on the reality, some don't even believe that they can happen. Remember, for somebody who is doing, started as a small scale operating, and the target maybe is in Kenya, then they see the opportunity that is opening. But now the information of how they can access that market becomes a bit limited. So as we do as we see the opening of the new area of DRC, there's also a lot as the BSPs that we have to do on the markets and on the SMEs that would want to venture in these areas that are outside Kenya. Apart from that, there's also, because DRC will be like exporting outside Kenya. The information regarding the exports, so the documentation and what is needed is also something that with us as BSP, we are trying to talk to our SMEs so that they don't see it as something that can deter them from expanding outside the Kenya. So with the DRC, with the other markets opening, it's also giving us an opportunity as BSPs to leverage on the information that has not been there so that it can be made easily accessible to the aspiring SMEs that want to capture the new markets.
Now, with that note, we are looking at the EAC, especially focusing on DRC Congo. That's a 90 million market there. We all know that the government has been working on giving incentives, especially those who are focused on matters of agriculture. The DRC Congo has already started an incentive where up to 1,000 acres of land is available to those large-scale farmers who are keenly interested in that. So that is something that we need to take up, especially as matters of agribusiness are concerned. I'd want to ask from the floor of the House if anyone has a question at this point, or do we continue with our panelists?
All right, I think I have a question actually, so I'm going to throw it on that side, yeah. Looking at the nature of BASPs and financial institutions and all this at the same time, Once the SME takes the leap from being an SME to a large business, does the partnership continue? Do you continue advising them? Do you continue keeping them on the, just walking with them the journey and ensuring that they are sustainable, independent, and all that at the same time? I think that would really be nice to know. Yeah, thank you.
Indeed, that's a very good question, because we know this conversation is very rife when we are looking for the funds, but after the funds, at the point of delivery, we disappear. At what point should that relationship terminate? Let's start off with Badia.
Thank you very much. I'd actually walk you through the journey and how it makes sense. Now, working with the BASP and just recognizing what the objectives are, the most important thing is mission alignment. And for that mission to be aligned, what we do as AFC is that the first level of screening is actually done by the BASP. On the basis of that, because you have a bigger program and the program objectives are very clear to you and the business advisory service provider, once the first level screening happens, then that pool of pipeline is then presented for funding. Now, the second level of screening would happen, and on the basis of that, you would pick clients who then have a very tight mission fit between the institution and the alignment of mission by the program itself. Now, remember, these are SMEs. The SMEs, they're small, so they're very risky, and they are also likely to falter. So the approach that we take is what is called supervised credit. We supervise that credit on the basis of milestones. So at the point of appraisal, we identify what these milestones are. What that does is that it gives you the opportunity to take corrective action at the point when you see a faltering, and probably also forestall a default when the exposure is still very small. Now you walk this journey and you finish it. It is likely that the SMEs who are small would become large actors. Now what happens, they fall into an umbrella of clients that we call anchors. So what an anchor would do, an anchor is, let's say, I would give an example, a processor, and they had walked the journey until where they got to processing. Now in our model is that they would pick smaller SMEs and walk with them the same journey through that supervised credit, and eventually you would have a pool of anchors who can therefore pick smaller SMEs. At the end of the program, you are able to demonstrate impact. Thank you.
Catherine, you want to add on to that?
I'll give it as a BAS perspective. So the issue is, let's say we start with a small SME, and our level SMEs is in that range, startup, small growth and scale SMEs. It is important for us to stick with the SME one because it's a commercial transaction. So it's each party is getting to get value. And what happens is a small SME, the BASP work involves packaging them to get the first tranche of finance that they need. But that is important it is important to stay with the SME because at the small SME, it means they probably don't need, for example, to hire full-time staff, or operations need to be outsourced so that then they can affordably run the SME. After a while, and we work with them to monitor payment of the credit given, they get to the next level where then they've traded enough and can afford some full-time staff, and we continue working with them. So our BASP advisory work involves not just transaction advisory, but also operational advisory. And we work with them and support until they can grow and scale. So staying on with the SME throughout the life of the SME is actually something that as a BASP we do because of the value that comes from both parties.
Madam Gakuye, let's speak to the fact that a majority of MSMEs, or rather SMEs, and financiers do not speak the same language. I'm not talking about the English, the Swahili, or even the Kikuyu, but they do not understand. How do we break down that jargon and break down that barrier? And what role do you think that BASPs can actually play to ensure that these persons, or rather these entities, are on the same platform?
I would say that I feel like BASPs will come to make our work easier because like from Equity Bank, We walk the journey of the customer from the very beginning, and if I'm the officer, I'm going to take the client from application through to the end. As you can see nowadays, we have a program in the TV stations where we are trying to look at the impact we have created. So we did not only lend, but what impact did we create after lending? Have we grown with these customers? So I feel like when the BASPs come and they are willing to walk the journey with the customers, then we will not have a ball dropped anywhere, and we will grow with them, and finally we can say that we've made an impact.
Badia?
What we see as the biggest role of BASPs in this dialogue between financial institutions and SMEs not speaking the same language is when a BASPs takes the role of an incubator and incubates a client who was not financially ready to a level that therefore you can walk a journey with. And this speaks to a relationship that has to have happened between that financial institution and that business advisory service provider. I would give an example. We are at the onset of running a fund for the youth out of college into agriculture, first of all without experience, and prepare them to participate into commercial banking. Now, this is a segment that ordinarily no one would look at. First of all, they are risky in themselves. The sector that they go into is risky, and there are certain things that you will not foresee. And unless they go through this incubation, there is no possibility that they would ever participate with a financial institution. So that is the relationship that we see with BASPs. On the flip side, if it were not for a business service provider, we would not be seated on this table today, because it is that relationship that we had with SRC that opened the doors for AFC with USAID and particularly KIMS. There's a level of preparation that has to go at the client level, but also upstream. Thank you.
Now, as a BASP, Oscar here, the issue of where you come in, imagine you've created, and what I'm going to borrow heavily from what Badia has said, that you need to have an agreement of sorts between FIs and BASPs. I don't know, are you willing to make it contractual, or is it going to be verbatim? In the event that you strike billions or your clients strike billions, will you charge them?
Thank you. I think this should be something that we can say should be a work in progress, because at the moment it's just a rapport that you create with the financial institution. There's no legal or any contractual agreement, but because of the realization of the importance of BSPs now in the facilitation of financial access, I believe that if you continue with the conversation, the respective bodies, you can be able to have now at least a legal or a contractual agreement, so that even if you worked at the branches far away from Nairobi, because mostly you will find that maybe some information might not be there at the branch, but now you have that contractual agreement. It makes it easy for that at least coordination and making the work easy for both sides. It will provide even the identification documents when you walk to a branch of a financial institution and introduce yourself. It will also make even the SMEs to at least understand what you are doing, because there are some that even before you explain to them and onboard them, you have to do a lot of discussion with the management. So going forward into this kind of engagement, having something like a contractual agreement that will make it easy for both the BSPs and also the financial institution in whichever branch that now we work in.
What I'm hearing, you want to add something, Madam Kashri? Go ahead.
I want to add weight onto that and speak specifically to the fact that as BASP we are aware of, for example, credit guarantee schemes that are in the market and who is offering them. And at some point we want to take a pipeline of SMEs to the banks that are participating in those schemes, but we tend to have a blockage, in a manner that the bank or someone out in the field may not be aware of that guarantee scheme that is happening. So by having a contractual agreement between the BASP and the FI, there's some information that is kept out of the knowledge of the SME. For example, how much is guaranteed, in case there's loss. But it will also give us a leeway to have our pipeline accepted faster in a commercial bank or any other financial institution, because we are aware of the FIs that are participating in this. So that would be something that would be very important for contractual agreements.
Now, in your various capacities as FIs and BASPs, I would want to know what active role have you taken to, foster building back better in light of COVID-19, and now that we're talking about recovery. But did you want to go first?
Looking at AFC and looking at our portfolio, COVID was a very interesting time for us. And coincidentally, that is the time all our data were showing positives, coincidentally. And when we participated in sessions like this and we told our stakeholders that during COVID, for some reason, everything was looking positive for AFC, it was strange. We noticed that a majority of people were moving back to the farmlands. A majority of people were taking agriculture seriously. There was a bit of concentration into the food markets and into animal production. So as the other sectors were getting a beating, we noticed that agriculture was actually looking up. And strangely, last year was our second best year in terms of recovery and in terms of disbursement. And that was a phenomenon for us. And it just went on to prove that that is a sector that is very resilient to certain kinds of shocks. And even we were shocked about that. And in our modeling, in our risk evaluation, we are now putting frameworks to prepare ourselves better, just in case such eventualities happen again. We would be able to absorb that unprecedented demand that we had last year.
That was COVID. The agriculture sector relatively did well because of the COVID shock. But now we find ourselves at a situation where climate change is actually becoming a challenge. Just today we had some information indicating that the US are recording the highest temperatures in history at 40 degrees. Nairobi right now is around 19 degrees Celsius, and we have already 23 counties that are facing drought. From where you sit now, are you likely to see now more business being driven to climate financing? And what role then would BASPs be playing to ensure that, MSMEs who are in this particular value chain do not, get depleted or their business do not sink at this point?
At the very low level, I think the most important thing is to prepare your clients for that eventuality. And again, in our portfolios, what we saw is that the segments that were most hit was the livestock sector. And what we did is just design around it. We noticed that certain parts of the country had very good fodder, had very good capacity, and certain parts of the country, the reverse was true. So what we did is that we came up with an offtake program, and in this offtake program, clients who had capacity and had fodder, we would fund them and encourage them to mop up the livestock from the areas where capacity was not there. Now you notice they would get it slightly cheap, and they would have pasture that is not utilized. So there's a motive for profit there. On the flip side, when you look at the communities where they have purchased from, there is sustenance of livelihood, because instead of an animal dying, you would give an exchange of maybe 15 or 18,000 shillings. Now, thank you. Now, what that did is that this pastoral farmer would have the ability to wait for the market next season when the rains would come. And the one who has capacity has an animal that they have sourced slightly cheaper, only fatten them, and make a margin when they go back to the market. When it comes to the relationship with BASPs, preparing financial institutions for green financing is an uphill task. And that is where they come in. There are protocols, there are agreements, and there are guidelines that need to be followed. Our biggest role is to lend and make sure that our portfolios are good. Then it is the role of this BASF now to hold our hands and show us that these are the protocols and these are the guidelines for you to access this funding to go into this sector.
Madam Catherine, I think that now the cannula has been dropped right at your feet. It is that you prepare FIs, to go through this situation. What's your take in regard? Because I know your experience is within ourselves. What have you seen, especially when it comes to matters of climate financing?
So, thanks. One, I'll approach it from the fact that there is need for knowledge of definition of what is climate financing, so that a transaction that is, can be regarded as climate finance is actually taken up by a financial institution. And some of them are known, it could be FODA, it could be, some easy known transactions. But then when we start going to mechanization, cooling system, cold storage, it's also important that as we package, as a BASF, as we package the SME for a climate, fund, then the knowledge is known both ways. By the financial institution, the fact that they do have a product that is fit for climate financing and targets, climate finance SMEs, and on the other side, that the SME is aware of what, climate finance, transactions are. And then also concessions that, come in there, because, looking at drought, it means turnover is reduced, return on investment. So the financial institutions also need to change and change the way they collect, the debt that they have provided, the kind of interest rates. That has to be also concessional to fit the climate finance kind of lending. So information has to flow on both sides. And good enough, there are financials or financial institutions that look into that, climate finance, and also supporting financial institutions to understand what that is and to change their systems to adapt climate finance lending to SMEs.
Now let's bring the FI, that is equity. Since you're the one here, you will answer to that. We've talked about the issue of availability of these funds and also the capacity and, are these SMEs able or capable of paying back? And that's where BASFs come in. They have told them this is their portfolio that will get. But then let's look at it this way. When it comes to issues of liquidity, commercial banks' interest rates in the country are way off. We all know that. Now, when you're talking about sustainability, are you looking at having a conversation between FIs and BASFs that will ensure that they have unpicked these people, they have done their research, they know they're ready and willing to kind of make concessions where they're concerned to ensure that we have this engagement, it is sustainable going into the future? Would you be considering that as FIs?
Yeah, I would say yes. And in terms of that, picking the customers that would lend to, and equity, specifically, we have two arms, Equity Group Holdings. We have two arms, the social arm and the commercial arm. And in the social arm right now, we have a pillar called Energy Pillar. And in this pillar, they've taken to themselves to train the internal customers on what is expected in climate smart. So we are going around, internal customers, I mean our employees, just to let them know what is expected on us and when we are lending to these MSMEs. Like for example, methane gas contributes the most to when it comes to pollution of the environment. So we have these products that when you lend, maybe you give a farmer a biodigester, then there is a reward for that. And I feel like if we would sit down with the BASFs, make them understand what it is that the financial institution is looking for and what it is that we are doing to make sure that we are aligned, then we will empower the MSMEs, and both of us are going to win. And even the MSMEs are going to be empowered on the same line. Yeah.
I'm hearing information. Information has to flow between FIs and BASFs alike to and fro. Badia, I can see you wanted to add on to that.
When it comes to costing of products, it is common knowledge that margins in agriculture, particularly at production, are very thin. Now, if the product that you get out into the market does not speak to that reality that the margins, particularly at production, are thin, then sustainability becomes a question, because eventually these portfolios will not perform. So what we have attempted to do in our situation is get into specific projects and programs that speak to a particular sector. For instance, when you look at the sugar industry, our role was to champion import substitution, and for that to happen, it meant that you have to fund more farmers to produce more sugar so that the factories have something to crush. Now, for that to happen, it meant that we went into an agreement, and in that agreement, we are actually lending sugar loans at 5%. That is unheard of. And you see, that is to make sure that we prepare the industry so that when the safeguards are opened, the safeguards would be open when the country is fairly ready to compete. So it is program specific, and it depends on who the players are on the table. And the contracting bit of it would have to pick out the realities of what is happening on the farms. Thank you.
Now, we have had the fact that how do we maintain, or rather set up sustainable partnership between BASFs and FIs. We've had transparency, information sharing. Let's tackle the issue of liquidity. Let the target business also understand what is required of them, and have, better yet, contractual agreements between FIs and BASFs so that you secure business two-way. Now that we find ourselves in this situation, and we're here because of the Kenya Investment Mechanism, conference, or rather say forum, so to speak. From where you sit and in your individual capacities, has it met your objectives? Let's start off with you, Oscar.
I would say this must be one of the first forums that the BSPs are all coming together with the financial institution to find a way of helping the SMEs. At the moment, we are in the rollout, I would say that, because the gap that was identified before the project started is really, being reduced. But there's a lot that still need to be done so that at least there's that compatibility and working together so that at least the gap that was there to be fully reduced. Yes, we are moving in the right direction, but yet we are still not yet there. The BSPs and the financial institution still have a gap that is supposed to work together so that at least we can speak the same language when we are in the financial institution halls and when we are now in the field speaking to our customers on behalf of them, so that we can make the funds available for the economic development.
Oscar, I will give you some moments to just think about the recommendations therein that you would give to ensure that we have now these sustainable partnerships going on to bridge those gaps that you have spoken of, as I come back to you now. Madam Catherine, from where you sit, has this particular platform or this forum, is it meeting your objectives?
Yes, I have to say it works, and for several reasons. One, being in Kenya Investment Mechanisms, we get into a network that exposes us to markets outside Nairobi, in the counties outside Kenya, in the East Africa region, and also access to financial institutions that are actually outside our continent interested in investing in businesses and SMEs in this country. So that's one network that I have to say has really worked, and it has positive impact around that. Secondly, because of the incentive mechanism to BASPs and financial institutions, we've been able to go to thin markets that previously would not have considered to go. And thin markets, I'm talking about regions and the kind of value chains that we would want to look at when it comes to financing, especially in agriculture. So that has enabled us actually trickle down to areas that, that would not have necessarily gone to. But beyond the program, we are sustainable enough in the fact that we're able to, commercially transact with SMEs and financial institutions. We have sustainability to actually, run as a BASP outside and post the end of, the program.
Madam Hanagakwe, has this particular platform here provided business for you? Has it worked? Is it meeting its objective?
Yes, I would say it has worked. Our partnership with Kenya Investment Mechanism and of course the BASP. Right now, out of the incentives that we are getting from Kenya Investment Mechanisms, we're able to reach areas we couldn't reach faster because they have enabled us to do that. We've purchased, for example, vehicles that will enable us to reach places more faster than we would have done before. And through the reports that we send to them every month, we've been able now to understand deeper. We were not even very keen on these reports. But now that we have specific reports for specific value chains in very targeted counties, now I can look at this and say, oh really, we have business here. So what can we do to enhance this, even to grow it to another level? So I would say it's meeting its objective, and as a bank, we are looking into, especially us looking into growing into 30% in agriculture. I would say Kim has given us a push to grow to this, yeah.
Last but not least, Mario.
There was a mission that visited West Pokot, I think about 3 weeks ago, and went to see the works that are happening within the 10 frontier counties. And I remember the question that we were being asked, why don't you shout about these success stories? It goes to show that something is actually happening. We have more incubators coming into the program. We have more incubators exiting. The success levels of the portfolio that you're currently seeing, that is something that we are proud of. And in terms of just the relationships after this project, we're actually seeing scalability. We are seeing participation in what we call the 10 frontier counties. Counties that ordinarily you would not look at when you speak business, but you would look at when you speak social. We are beginning to speak business in those 10 frontier counties. And looking at the capacities of staff who are implementing these projects, we're also seeing that there's definitely an improvement of capacity, because the requirements of these programs and projects definitely have a component of capacity building. So we are seeing a 360 in terms of development from the farmers themselves, from the position of the FI, and also from the position of the country because of the participation of funding into the sector. Thank you very much.
Now, let's rope in, yes, some questions from the floor. Rudyard. Great.
Thank you very much. My name is Tendai Mtana. I'm the County Executive Committee member for Agriculture, Mombasa County. I have a question for Catherine, but I want to set a context for AFC and for Roger before Catherine can answer it, because it speaks to the very question that you're discussing here today. So let me set the context. I want to get this right. Mr. Bonano, last year I convened a round table, and your Coast Region office was represented. And they were tasked with providing a framework, which earlier on I spoke about under the name of Blue Savannah. And it's essentially targeting the arid and semi-arid counties. And I convened it as the CEC Mombasa because we were the port city, and a lot of post-harvest management is handled at that area for counties in the coast and also on the northern frontier. We had two challenges, and this is what I'd like Catherine to speak about, because I think the business advisory framework will meet, I think, a small business challenge that your coast region is facing. The history of a lot of the arid and semi-arid areas is tied to land ownership that is caught in a succession battle between primarily, and I know Phoebe is still here, older men who are struggling with releasing the succession and operationalization of family businesses that have been successful in agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. That's one challenge, and I'd like Catherine to speak to how in the Northern Frontier you've handled that. But the second, I think, is with yourself in terms of why I think a business advisory service will help families that need that kind of support tied to the transitions that happen with your officers at the ground. Kwa Kiswahili tunasema mlituacha kwa mataa. And you had a change in office, and we had 3 projects that were in the pipeline. 3 families that were dealing with acreage over 150 acres that they were going to they were going to restore cashew nut farming at the coast. How are you, and this conversation I know can sound theoretical here, but how is this whole mechanism going to allow yourselves to be able to be consistent at the ground level, have business advisory services at play that understand the biases that are historical, cultural, and caught up in customary practice? Thank you.
I think, Catherine, maybe you can take the first part about, land ownership issue, given an example there with the background of what is happening down on the coast. We all know ourselves, community land and such. So as BASFs, how are you dealing with that? Then Dr. Bonano can take over the issue on, matters of financing. There's a claim there that uliacha watu kwa mata. So let's start off with Madam Catherine.
Thank you for the question. So, one, I agree. Collateral, especially land, is cross-cutting in ASAL areas, but also in other sectors. Women-led businesses also suffer the same. Same title of land is owned by multiple families, or is not even owned by the woman, same as youth. And that set aside, there are ways we've been able to close deals. And one is approaching impact funds who tend to look for impact compared to the kind of collateral that the business is able to offer. That's one. Others are those funds that are Sharia compliant oriented. They also tend not to look at things like title deeds, and they look at the impact or the kind of, if it's equipment financing, whatever is being purchased is part of the collateral. So there are ways to go around it, but I have to say that part that certain level of collateral is needed also creates a bottleneck for a lot of SMEs to access finance. But we've had a lot of inflow of impact finance that tends to look at other things, gives grace periods, looks at capacity building the SME as they provide the finance as part of access to finance. But that said, as a BASF, we're also aware that a financial institution is regulated and they have a regulator, and the regulator requires that they also ring-fence shareholder interests in the money that they're lending out. So one of the required tools is, for example, a title deed or a logbook. So again, there needs to be a conversation at regulatory level to look at the communities that are not captured within that regulation, especially those in community land ownership that will need access to finance, but that bottleneck of the collateral is an actual deterrent to accessing finance. So that needs to also be captured at regulatory level. Thanks.
That which you need that is financial, we will get into a structuring table. And through that structuring, I see a sort of a guarantee with the involvement of the county government being a possibility. We worked with one of the county governments when there was a viral outbreak of maize, and therefore they had to stock down on their maize production and show up their production of fodder. But in this program, they needed quite a bit of mechanization. And when you looked at the farmers, they couldn't afford those heavy equipment on their own. When we structured a guarantee around that, and this equipment could be taken to the farmers, and AFC was assured of repayment, I'm sure right now you see from the central parts of this country, the level of fodder production has gone to another level. And it was not much. It was just 35 million shillings, about 8 pieces of big equipment that would go into the farms of about 11 cooperatives, about 2,000 members. Now, those are things that we are willing and ready to structure. After this meeting, we will share our contacts. In our midst, there is an expert for guarantee design. He's called Jackson Echoka. Maybe he may just rise so that you see him. And this is a resource that the Agricultural Finance Corporation has seconded to the National Treasury to help this conversation around developing guarantee schemes and reaching out to those very segments that are considered extremely risky. So, both tutakuashia mata. Thank you.
There's a question that comes in, and this is entirely to the financial institutions. And this person says, I understand that Kim has been paying incentive fees to BASPs, which has been highly successful. A question to the financial institutions in the panel. Are you ready to pay success fees to a BASP for bringing you good business?
The question was, as FIs, are you ready to pay fee for successful business, so to speak, to BASPs? We got it right.
All right. As that comes in, maybe let me just read all of them to just save on a bit of time. The next general questions are, to the BASPs, what has worked well for you in engagement with FIs over the last 2 years, and what's not working? To the financial panelists, the question is the same. What has worked for you over the last 2 years? What is not working? What needs to be fixed? And the last question comes in that people want to get a list of the BASPs and FIs working with Kim so they can also be able to know who to interact with in the process. Yeah. So you can take it away.
Far end.
So whether we pay BASPs for the services they offer, I think BASPs are in the room and they can do the confirmation on our behalf. Whether we participate in KIMS as a financial institution, yes we do. Just before the BASPs confirm, yes, we actually pay for their services. Thank you. And we are willing to contract for as long as the missions and the program objectives are well designed and we know what impact we are going to get at the end of the program. Yes, we do.
What has not been working from where you stand, or what needs recommendations going forward as you come to a close?
What has not been working sometimes is the preparation for the incubatees. I think that is where the conversation needs to go slightly deeply, because if these incubatees who then come for funding are not properly prepared, then there's a possibility that you would reject an entire cohort or an entire list. So I think what then needs to happen is just a deeper conversation on how then we prepare these pipelines for absorption.
Are you willing to pay the fee once BASPs bring in the business?
What has not worked, I would say is still the same thing he said, that during the preparations, maybe the BASP does not quite understand what the financial institution is looking for. And in that line, we need a lot of patience when we are coaching these MSMEs, so that as they come to the bank, whether the bank is not ready to pick them at that particular time, then the BASP is still willing to go with them the journey until they are ready to be taken up. I would say that we are ready to pick conversation with the BASPs, look at the terms and conditions of our contracts, and we can talk about the fee in the terms and conditions of our understanding of our agreement.
So I have to say, one, I'll confirm with Bonano, there are financial institutions that pay if they have in their processes that they pay for success of closure, and there are those that don't because they don't have that in their processes. So it's a conversation that would need to be have have had with each individual institution. Secondly, what the question was mentioning that as BASPs we receive incentive fees, it's good to mention that that's a de-risking mechanism, but it's not 100% fee in itself. So even as BASPs and as private sector institutions, we are expected to charge a fee for the work that we do, with SMEs as well as with financial institutions. And what I have to say hasn't worked is sometimes, especially SMEs that are, have finance that is fighting for resources, paying for BASP services doesn't become priority compared to paying salaries and paying rent, for example. So one thing that needs to improve, I have to say, is the services of a BASP are needed when you set up the SME, but usually our services come in when it's really mandatory and you need money to pay farmers in a week's time. So it becomes a challenge to close a deal within a week. And what happens is we have to advise the SME that it is a journey that takes a while to close a transaction. But I have to say, the mechanism has worked, Kenya Investment Mechanisms. The de-risking process has allowed us, like I said before, to go to thin markets. And as a private sector organization, we are also sustainably able to run our operations without necessarily depending on the incentive fee.
Yes, last but not least, maybe you can answer to that as we bring this to a close, Mr. Onyono.
Okay, on what has not worked, especially for the BSPs with the SMEs and the financial institutions, is somehow the urgency. You find that sometimes SMEs we can call it like a crash program. They come to you when they know they're at the dead end, and you see us is to facilitate because we don't have the finance. So when when a customer comes with the urgency that he needs the money, and you have to do all the documentation and the preparation for the bank to understand that this is an emergency, it becomes not easy for you to secure funding for such a customer. And you see, when he or she is given a referral that if you go to this BSP, you will be assisted, and because of the time he or she fails to get that assistance, the information going back is now negative. You tell us that they have money and they're telling us they don't have money. See, it's that information. That is the challenge that sometimes we get. But I know with the time and the acceptance that we're going to have in the market, they will be able to understand that it is a journey. It is not a one-off that you walk in and you go out with money. So that's the challenge that we have been having with the SMEs.
Well, thank you very much. We're discussing forging sustainable partnerships between business advisory service partners and financial institutions. And my take home is that there's need for information sharing, transparency, and walking the journey post the finance, as well as addressing the issues of liquidity when it comes to FIs and having specified investments, as well as contractual agreements between BASPs and FIs, and creating awareness and making the SMEs understand the language as well as what is needed for them. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We've been speaking to Oscar Onyono, founder of Swaso Consultancy. Thank you very much for your time. And also Madam Catherine Gitonga, the CEO of Smart Regional Consultants, Asante Sana. And we had Hannah Gakuya, who is a relationship manager, partnership and ecosystem banking at Equity. And last but not least, Bonano Badia, Chief Credit Officer at the Agricultural Finance Corporation. Asante Sana for your insight. I've been your host, Regina Manyara. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, Regina, and the entire panel on that exciting segment and feature around fostering sustainable partnerships between the BASPs and the FIs. I know, yes, I know I'm seeing a cut of time. Bearing in mind the session coming in next is meant to be our last one for the day. I see there's one participant here on the side really looking at me because maybe nimekata kumpatia nafasi ya kuongea, ma'am. I know it's the last segment for the day. You had a cue.
I like this whole issue of BASPs, and especially for those of us who deal with small scale and micro businesses, women's businesses. Some of them are afraid to take loans. Once they go into a bank and they are turned away, they don't want to go back. So the fact that there is somebody else they can go to before they go to the bank is a very attractive thing for women. And I wonder, what does it cost for a BSP? I mean, for a micro business to work with a BSP? I would just like to know that, have an idea.
Sam, how many seconds or 1 minute are you giving for this? All right, so 1. Catherine, probably you could just... okay, so Catherine, anyone who will want to answer that bit? Yeah, sure, Oscar.
I would say this is an agreement that we have with the SMEs, because we don't have a standard charge, but it depends on the nature of the work that we are going to do to work with the SME to the level that it will be able to access the finance. So there's no standard charges that we can say we have to do it this way. But it is a business that you discuss with your customer, and you agree on the charges, and you agree on how you are going to be meeting, because it's just a discussion that you have on how you are going to work with the customer and how long it's going to take you, depending also on the charges and the area that you are working with the customers.